This.
Well, are you going to ask me? Are
Yes,
you going to ask me
I'm gonna talk to you.
questions?
Yes. Don't you love Stephanie, the way that we ad lib? So I kind of love once we get going on these pre-calls, I'm like, oh my God, this is too good. We got to get started. And so then I bring the audience in. I'm like, hey, you guys are with us now. So everybody, thank you so much once again for joining us today. We've got a great guest. We're going to get into sound bowl healing, but technically sound healing, and then get into the sound bowls and all the different ways that you can do that. I think there's tuning forks and Stefanie Butler is with me with Atlanta Sound Healing, and she's been in this field for over 20 years, is an expert in it. And actually, Stephanie, you were saying that you've got a degree that you've gotten through the
Oh,
sound.
well, no. I got when I started doing my sound healing sessions, there's a lot of touch and it brings up a lot of feelings, and so I was doing a lot of, counseling, and I wanted to kind of cover my bases. Although sound healing, there's no what would the word be? There's no licensure to be a sound healing, but and so I got my degree in, I got a master's in divinity because that kind of covers the counseling and the ability to touch. And that's where I was introduced to sound healing because I took a vibrational healing class and it mentioned sound healing. And I was like, whoa, this is me. I was, I had actually done live sound for many years and I was a musician and I started looking into it and I checked out a lot of different modalities. In those days, I said, sound healing, are there any courses? And people are like, sound healing? No, you're just going to have to use your intuition, which is very much a part of it. And I said, okay. But the first time I heard a Tibetan bowl, it was like, oh, there's my modality. So, and I have used crystal bowls and um, I do have, a tuning fork. So that that is how I got into sound healing. And like I was telling you earlier, nobody really knew what it was. So in those years, it was all about introducing it and 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 doing a lot of events and I was telling you that I used to teach the bowls with the International Sound Therapy Association and present them at the cymatics conference, yearly cymatics conference. And now I knew it was going to happen. And now it's like yoga. Remember when yoga came out? Everybody's like,
Yeah.
what's that? And now everybody does yoga. Well, now everybody wants a sound bath,
Yeah.
which is, I did those over the years, and then I kind of stopped doing group events because I felt very drawn to personal work because that way I was working with the energy of just that one
Mhm.
person, because it's very energetic.
Yeah. One energetic field at a time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to relax people, and it was a great for introducing them to the sounds of the bowls and how they do relax you. But yeah, if you want, for me, I got, I felt a lot more accomplished, I guess would be the word. A lot more got accomplished in an individual sound therapy session. And that way too, I can put the bowls on them and around them, and and they can feel. So the vibration is very much a physical part too. I think you
Absolutely.
shared you've put one on your head. So yeah,
So, that's the beautiful part about sound bowl healing. I want to hit on a few different things that you've already brought up. And, I love technology. Like I'm surrounded with technology, amazing technology, but sound frequency and sound healing or sound bowls and sound frequency and just the whole subject of that. I don't think people really understand how powerful that is. And I know personally I didn't. I'm not going to say I poo-pooed it because like I want you to talk a little bit about some of the Tibetan monk and, some of the sound bowls you have there, but clearly that's been used for thousands of years. There's a real history in sound frequency and sound vibration and the benefits of it. And so I definitely want to delve into that. But I have a friend of mine, Melissa from Canada, who's a sound frequency sound bowl healer, and she came down and spent some time here in Virginia with me. And so I was like, this is going to be great, right? And so we're doing the sound bowls and this was in our house. This is, I had a few other people there. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really powerful. Like I can literally feel the vibration of these bowls going through my entire body. It's almost like your whole body is resonating. It's picking up the vibration of that bowl, and every molecule of the body is feeling that. And it's kind of euphoric in a way. But Melissa also brought the bowl that goes on the head. And I do believe that that was a Tibetan bowl. I believe it was a brass bowl, if I'm correct. And so she put that on the head, and I would say it, is probably 3 inches around, like you put it on the top, but you have about a solid 3 inch space around your head, and then hit it with the little gong, and that thing absolutely blew my mind. That thing literally, when it started vibrating, it sent the frequency from my head all the way down into my feet and through my feet. And the interesting part about it was you only hit it twice, but it kept like regenerating. It was like vroom, vroom, vroom. And I was like, and I was literally almost, I wouldn't say going into a trance, but it was putting me in sort of a transcendental state, would probably be the best way of saying it. And there was something about that really, once I was in it, I didn't want to get out of it. Like it was so amazing, and to feel the vibration and then to almost kind of tune in to the fact that from a very simplistic standpoint, it's not real, like it's not real complicated technology. I think that's another thing that I like about it. It's somewhat simplistic. And I also like the fact that it's somewhat affordable. And I know that sound bowls can get very expensive. So I realize that, the price ranges on those. But this piece of technology to me was like unifying past, present, and future because I could feel and see that this was way more sophisticated and way more advanced than just quote unquote sound healing. And I could feel how the vibration of that was energizing the cells, cleansing the body. Like I could feel multiple things happening at the same time. And so, going through all that and then realizing that this is technology that does go back thousands of years, which you might have more information on, to me was just absolutely mind blowing. And so, I guess what I'm getting at is anything that I thought I knew about sound bowl technology in itself was completely blown away by the feeling that I got from using it. And that was, the helmet or the hat that I put on or the bowl on my head in addition to just the bowls that you're using in a room where it's resonating and vibrating everything in the body. So with all that being said, I'm going to throw that back to you. But do you want to talk about a little bit about the history of the sound bowls and what it was that I was experiencing, and maybe some more on a more
well,
physics level of
sure.
what's actually happening?
Sure. I mean, in sound healing, basically what we're talking about are, fundamental frequencies or resonance, So a resonant frequency, we all have a natural frequency. Our body, every cell, every organ, every part of our body has a resonant frequency. And so resonance is probably the most important part of sound healing, and that's not new technology. That's, creator universe
Right,
technology.
right, right.
So the what's happening is it's called entrainment. And through entrainment we can affect the resonance of an object or a person or a body. So I kind of think of the body as it's been compared to say an orchestra. And when there's one instrument out of tune, it's very obvious. And so entrainment is the ability to bring the clarinet back into tune so that the orchestra is working fully and completely, And I think probably that's used in engineering when they build bridges about resonance and
Hmm.
how it can start. And I think there was uh I mean, back, you say, thousands of years, and yeah, and I think it was in the 1600s the first time the guy put the two pendulum clocks next to each other, and then eventually they started swinging at the same thing. So that's resonance, that's sympathetic resonance, because the strongest vibration will bring the others into resonance with it. So now the bowls, uh, the 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 beauty of the bowls, and the history, the true history of sound healing, at least Tibetan sound healing, it's very let's just say when China invaded Tibet and the monks were escaping China and they had these bowls and everybody's like, "Oh, what are those?" And they're like, "Oh, nothing. They're just, food bowls." Because it was a very deep and important part of their healing. And I guess, a lot of indigenous cultures, they use sound, and it's very sacred, and it's very, you know, I don't want to say it's not given to the masses, but there's usually a medicine man or someone who has worked with that. And so the bowls, so they were like, no, no big deal. But if you start digging into the history, which I'm not going to get into, you will start, there are people that have been able to get deeper into that history and understand the power of the bowls. And they traditionally were made with seven metals. And I'm not sure. I bought all my bowls from the bowl village, is what I call it, where they're hand hammered,
Hmm.
in Bangladesh. Now, do they use all seven of the metals? I'm not certain. But that makes sense if you think about seven as the number, a spiritual number, and the planets. And, so the thing about the bowls, they have a natural, excuse me, they have, I'm sure your audience, or it's not, back when I started, it wasn't very well known, but it's more common now to hear about binaural beats,
Hmm.
which we all, it has to do with brain waves. And so there's different brainwave states, beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma. And the thing in brainwave entrainment, you can see, you can find these videos that are like gamma brainwaves for studying, for relaxation, because what it's doing is it's putting two different frequencies, one in one ear, one in the other. And because we can't hear the lower frequencies when of a relaxed state, so like three or four. So what happens is if you put like 10 hertz here and 7 hertz here, it creates the difference, which is a 3 hertz. And that will create this binaural beat. And that will entrain, which I just spoke about. So it will bring the brain into a lower brainwave state. And so the other thing that occurs, well, I'm sorry, back up a little bit. The bowls create naturally, it's a monaural beat. They create naturally that entrainment into a lower brainwave state. And what happens in a lower brainwave state is you're able to access your natural healing capacity. you know, and it can also, when let's say I have a client on the table, the first thing I do is I have what I call my, this is my tester bowl. And so I start playing the bowl around and it will make a dissonant sound when I'm in an area that obviously is out of balance. So, as you work with them, things like that start to happen. But the beauty of it is, like you said, you just put a bowl on top of your head and you were like, "Oh my gosh." So you can imagine if you're working with the bowls and in a certain technology and somebody is able to do that kind of treatment with you. And yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know if you wanted all that, but I gave
I
it to
definitely want all that
you.
and
I
more
mean, that's the
and
basics. And
more.
frequencies, I mean, we're all frequencies, we're all energy, and that comes from the beginning. I mean, that comes from the very beginning of our creation. We're probably made of sound, and there's all kinds of things out there. Like they can make music out of the sound of your DNA, and a lot of creation myths begin with sound. The Christian Bible, the in the beginning was the word, and the Hindus have Om. And so it's sound has been available since the beginning, and we're all vibrational. So really, we're all sound, if you think about it, you know.
That's the beauty of it. It always circles back, and it's sometimes what we would consider to be the simplest things that are actually the most beautiful. I'll never forget, I had a guy that worked with NASA and did a lot of real high tech stuff. And he said, the interesting thing about technology is the more advanced it gets, the more simple it gets. So as you really start developing things, they actually start becoming more simplified. And sound frequency, which is inherent in everything within our society, with music and everything that we're kind of about, comes in such a wide form and a wide variety of different modalities. And I think once you start tapping in and understanding the power of it, then you're much more conscious of the frequencies that you're around and moods and mood swings and things like that. I love the analogy of how the body is the orchestra, and when one instrument goes out of play, it throws off the whole symphony, it throws off the whole orchestra. And
Right. It
I,
also it also disrupts our homeostatic balance. We're in homeostasis, and sound, like if you've ever been feeling real chill, and all of a sudden a loud noise is created and you're like, "Oh," and you're actually thrown out of balance. Your blood pressure may rise. I mean, I live in Atlanta, and driving in Atlanta traffic, I'm a pretty calm person until that happens. And so I have to do a lot of breathing, and I have talked to clients who, like, say maybe had a car wreck or whatever, they've been in an accident, and so they're just can't, when they're driving, they're like, "Ah," and we produce a humming tone for them, humming. And that's the other beauty. Even if you don't have a bowl, we can make sounds. So humming or toning, or will begin to help bring us back into the balance. And the other thing is, music, I mean, noise. We're in such a noisy world. And I actually, in the beginning, I wrote a lot of did a lot of blogs about this kind of stuff. And I write about, what a noisy world and how it throws us out of balance. And the more aware you become of sound and how it affects you, the more aware you become of your surroundings. And I have had, you know, I've worked with a few restaurant owners, and I'm like, "You're playing this music is like horrifying," and it's like, "What?" And so, just when you're out in public, and you can watch people get annoyed. My
Mhm.
sister, I watch her, she gets really annoyed by music, or a leaf blower, or all of these things that can really take us out of balance can be, like I said, you can hum your way back into it, but just awareness. Awareness is always an important part of healing and changing things. So we have the ability to bring ourselves back into that homeostatic balance. And sound is definitely, people now, there's sound baths everywhere, and people just are like, oh my gosh, it was so amazing. Because we don't relax very much. I mean, how often do we go into that brainwave state? We're all up here. We're
Hmm.
all like, oh, what's my next task? What's my next task? And I've had many people say to me, oh, I can't meditate. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you come have a bowl session? And and it's interesting because some people are a little afraid to go to relax. And I don't know what that, it's like they're so used to being up here that they are like, I'm not sure I can relax. But then, we all going to seek a way to relax, and there's a lot of unhealthy ways to do that. So my point being, these people, they get on my table, and I start working with them, and the next thing you know, they're gone, and and that space is where you want to be to connect with your your super conscious, with your guides, with whatever your belief system is. I've had people talk to Jesus. I've had people, be presented with profound information during that state, and that's creation. That's the creative and creation state, and
Hmm.
that's what sound can do for us.
Can you
And
talk, yeah, can you talk a little bit about like some of the optimal frequencies? You were talking about alpha and gamma and some of these different brainwave states. What are some of the more beneficial ones for relaxation, and what would be, some?
well, yeah, sure. I mean, here's the thing, when you see CDs and stuff that are, this is for relaxation, this is for this is for that. I'll tell you, there's no, as far as I'm concerned, there's no one works for everybody. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because you're at a different frequency than I am, and there's no way that your liver is vibrating at the same rate as mine, at least in my belief. So, in terms of in terms of healing, I mean, I can just briefly tell you that, most of us are spending our time in the beta state, and that's like 13. I'm going to give you the basic range. So that's like 13 to 20 hertz. So these are all below our hearing our threshold, so these are feeling. So this is the brain, but the brain is, creating these waves. And so that's where most people spend their time. And then we have the alpha waves, which are probably like 7 to about 13. And that's where we are when we start daydreaming, when you're sitting there thinking about something and then you're like, whoa. And when we're meditating, we're usually creating and using an alpha brainwave state. And then there's theta waves, which are, that's like REM sleeping, dreaming, hypnosis, lucid dreaming. So we're down to like 4 through 7. And that's the state just before you fall asleep, or maybe when you just wake up. And
Hmm.
boy, that right there, that state can be very powerful if you start really, as you're starting to fall asleep, if you can just kind of stay in that state for a little while, you
Hmm.
really, that's the border between conscious and subconscious. And most of us operate from our subconscious, let's be real.
Hmm.
And so, we're like, why did I do that? I don't even know. It's like, so you're able to really access those parts of yourselves, and then I think delta is, I might have these backwards. That might be delta. Um, then there's, where you're completely unconscious and in sleep. And then uh, recently we get into the gamma waves, which are the higher ones, which like Tibetan monks stay in the gamma wave, and that's a whole nother level. I use gamma wave technology to do quantum healing. I do a quantum healing work as well. I was trained in quantum sphere healing. And so I access the quantum brainwave state to access the quantum field. And I'm sure you're familiar with the quantum field in your technology. So I think that's where a lot of pioneers have been going or have for a while. That's not that new, but it's in my lifetime. Nobody ever told me about gamma brainwave states. So, all that to say, there's one way to know the best frequency for you. What do you think that is? You feel it.
Right.
You feel it and you go, oh, so, you know, this idea that one shoe, I mean, let's just, one shoe doesn't fit everybody. So one thing that relaxes you might irritate the crap out of me. I don't know, it just. So my point is, if you buy something or if you try a modality and you're like, that didn't do anything, there's nothing wrong with you. That
Hmm.
just means you have more exploration to do. Because I'll tell you the truth, I have people, I've used the crystal bowls and I've had people to be like, oh, they irritate people. And other people are like, oh my gosh. And, so it's always a matter of your own, well, orchestra, right?
Hmm.
And what you respond to.
So is it possible that, throughout the course of your days in life, that there's certain frequencies that you resonate more to at one time? So you might find that, alpha or gamma, whatever is at one point is really feeling it, and then maybe because of a mood swing or a change that maybe there's another frequency set at another time that's actually going to be a little more soothing or relaxing. Do those can kind of change based on emotions or your life, or are you kind of dialed in just genetically into a sort of a general frequency range that really resonates with you?
Hmm. That's an interesting thought. I have never really thought about that.
One of the things that we talk about a lot, because although the technology part is kind of big here, but the other part of it is talking about emotion and feeling, because emotion and feeling really is a very strong field. And in the world that we live in, you can be on a roller coaster ride where one minute you're euphoric and the next minute, you're in traffic, like you said. But what I find is that consciousness and being conscious of the emotional field that you're in is ultimately the most important thing, because you recognize right away that I have shifted. Like when you were talking earlier about that homeostasis vibration, and then something comes in and disrupts that. And in life, it could be sound, it could be emotion, but ultimately it's changing the frequency and the vibration of everything that you're putting out. And the goal is to stay in those higher frequency sets that are, better for the body and better for the mind and ultimately better for your overall well-being. But I guess what I try to talk about from time to time is just catching yourself and saying, well, there's been a shift. It's not that the shifts are not going to occur. They do. This is life. But the goal as you get more tuned in is to feel, hey, the vibration is off. I feel that the music now has shifted and I'm in a stress, anxiety, fear mode, whatever it might be. And then figuring out, okay, now I need to shift out of that. I'm
Oh
acknowledging that.
yeah.
I'm going to flow through that, but I'm going to figure out. And the one thing that I always talk about is music, music being songs that you like, things that put you in a good mood. And then, you brought it up and I've talked about it also, but even if you can't listen to music, you can still generate your own sound frequency. So whether that's through singing or chanting or all these different things, ultimately, the sound really can help like stabilize everything, bring you out of those mood swings and get you back into a real calm, like thoughtful mindset where now you're back to where, you've kind of pulled yourself out of that. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? And
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
well, good, because I love hearing this. This is awesome. And yeah, share
Well,
as many of those as you'd like.
well, as you know, I started a podcast about a year and a half ago. It's called Conscious Heart Co-Creation. And one of the things that I really talk about is emotion and trauma, and how if we don't work with our trauma, it creates a block. I mean, it has to express. And so if you're not going to deal with it and clear it out of your energetic field, it's going to create dis-ease.
Hmm.
And so, and part of that is really learning to know yourself and understand how you respond, right? And I can speak from this from personal experience because 10 years ago I couldn't get out of bed. And I knew I was like, I have some trauma to heal. Because that's, I mean, there's a great author that talks, Donna Nawaska. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly her full name, but she talks about how our childhood creates our diseases later in life because they create blocks and they create disease. And so trauma, doing inner child work, really understanding who you are. You have to know yourself. And you have to dedicate yourself to that. And I know we all have busy lives, but I'm telling you, if you don't do that healing, it will stop your life as it did for mine. It'll be like, okay, we don't know how else, this is my body talking to me. We don't know how else to get you to deal with this crap. So we're just going to shut it down until you do, you know? And so I think that, as I said, we're vibrational. We are vibrational, we're frequency. And so that's one response to disease and such. And part of that awareness that you're talking about is, and that's why I talk about it on, in a blog. It's like we don't even understand, we're in such a noisy world that we don't even recognize that we're getting taken out of balance, and that I remember my sister came over one day, we were sitting on the back porch and we're having a lovely chat, and all of a sudden I'm watching her, and a guy had started blowing his leaves, and I watched her, and everything about her changed. She just got so irritated. And finally I said, "Are you irritated?" "I don't know. I don't think so." And I'm like, "I think you are." And I said, "Is that leaf blower bothering you?" "Yes, it's driving me crazy." And I said, "Let's go inside." And so the other thing that happens, and I don't want to get into too much, well, let's just say there are forces out there that want to make us stay. I call it low frequency, high frequency.
Hmm.
They want us to stay in the lower
Yeah.
frequency. And so they produce uh, events, physical events
Hmm.
to lower our frequency. They don't want us to understand this very basic ancient science that, and so we have to work with that as well. I do a lot of healing and protecting of my energetic field.
Hmm.
We're energetic. We have different energetic bodies, and they're getting bombarded with frequencies, EMFs and chemicals and the food that we're eating and all that. And so there's protection that you can do, grounding into the earth, because the earth is our home, and we can connect with her, and she can provide that sort of healing resonance, for
Hmm.
us. But like everything I'm saying, it requires awareness. And when we have these things, what are they? This thing, this is a phone. It was created to keep us asleep so that we're just so like we're asleep, we're just rolling, 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 and we don't have any idea what's going on with us,
No.
you know? And then it's like you go to the doctor and it's like you need some, stress medicine. I do. And it's like, yeah, you're stressed. And you know, so, so self-awareness is critical to this. And then at that point, you begin to recognize when you are out of balance,
Yeah.
and you begin to recognize that, I mean, I'm very careful about what music I listen to.
Hmm.
I'm just going to go ahead and say this, and if it doesn't resonate with anybody, that's fine. But they they put they put technology in music to kind of uh, disrupt you that
Hmm.
you're unaware of.
Hmm.
And so I'm very careful about what music I listen to. And I'll tell you the most beautiful music for me is like whale music.
Mm,
Um, you know, and the thing is too, as a musician, if somebody's really depressed, let's say, and I had a client who was very depressed, and I started playing this very almost melancholic music, and they really tuned into that. And then we gradually began to, play, a little lighter music. So you can't just dive in and say, listen to this, it'll make you feel better. If somebody's really down, you got to kind of move them up that scale, that emotional scale,
mhm,
because
mhm,
you music. I mean, a march creates different energy than
mhm, mhm.
a lullaby, or so so it's a matter of where you are and things that may create relaxation for one person. I'm like, you listen to this? And they're like, oh, yeah, it really relaxes me. And I'm like, okay. And, I play well music, and somebody's like, oh my God, can you what is that? So, music is so important, but also understanding that we're not always in control of our
Mhm,
vibrational world. And so,
mhm.
any time that we can become aware of what works for us, the better.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, um, I think your devices work with energy, and I think that people might want to explore protection, energetic protection
Mhm,
things like grounding,
mhm.
creating a shield. That I call it my love bubble. When I go out in public, I encase myself in a love bubble, and that way I'm surrounded by this energetic field, and only love can pass through it. And that includes pass out of it. So if I'm feeling anger and hate or whatever, that's trapped in the bubble with me. And whose frequency is going to be affected, and who's, and then I'm shielded from any energy or frequency coming at me that isn't in love, because love is the most creative force in the universe. And you combine love with sound, you're in nirvana then.
Yeah, that's pure nirvana. So many things that I want to touch on, and that was a brilliant uh, talk there with some of the stuff. Now, one of the things that I kind of have followed is that, emotion gets stored in the body, right? Like you were saying earlier. And eventually that trauma or that emotion needs to be released out of the body. And I love the fact that, the body's like, hey, we're going to have to deal with this. So we're going to shut down and we're going to start the dis-ease process. And we don't have to get in any detail, but I'm just curious, when you had that moment where you woke up and you were kind of in a space that was not ideal, did you use sound frequency then? Was that one of the modalities that you used to shift out of that and sort of cleanse that energy out of the body? Can you talk about that maybe just a little bit?
Well, sure. Well, uh, absolutely. I mean, I was pretty much crippled, so I wasn't going to be doing any bowl sessions for anyone else for a few years. And um, and so the biggest, our consciousness, we're fractals of source. So our consciousness has the same creative energy as source creator, and whatever term you use, God, whatever that is, we're one with that. So our consciousness and our thoughts are very powerful. And I will say it was scary. Because nobody could tell me what was going on. So I had to do a lot of my own research. I came up with my own diagnosis, and when I finally found somebody that said, "Oh yeah, that's correct, and you did a good job," and blah blah blah. So, but in those 10 years, as I was beginning the healing, the traumatic healing, the physical healing, I changed my diet. I did tons of research, and I started reading books. Like I found a book I was talking about. It's called Childhood Disrupted by
Hmm.
Donna Jackson Nakazawa. How your biography becomes your biology and how you can heal. Because I had to use some pharmaceuticals, but I knew what I was dealing with, and it was like I kind of had to at that moment in the beginning because I was crippled. And I immediately began working with how to get off of that. Did I use sound? Yes. And I had just been to that gamma training, the quantum sphere healing training, which was no accident. So I accessed the quantum field a lot through gamma brainwave technology, and I spent a lot of time there with my higher self and doing a lot of my healing. And and I think the most important thing was never once did I not believe that I could heal myself. And that's the power. Never once. I mean, I work with people and they're like, and it's like, you can heal yourself. And that kind of belief, ooh, that's some power. That you
Mhm.
talk about a powerful vibration. I never doubted that I could heal myself. And it took a long time. You know, natural healing, um, most people when we're using pharmaceuticals, they're not treating the disease, they're treating a symptom.
Mhm.
And so we've all gotten used to this immediate relief, you know. But natural healing and certainly trauma healing and using sound, while it can make you feel good and it can change your energetic pattern, but it takes time to create that as a permanent pattern. So you might have felt great when that bowl was on your head and then you walked away and it was like, a week later, you're like, where's that feeling? Because it
Mhm.
takes time,
Mhm.
to create that as your natural resonance. And so it took time, but today I'm off all medications. I hike 2.5 miles a day. I go to the gym. I'm pain free. And, I attribute my unwillingness to admit defeat to it and my willingness to do whatever was required to heal. And let's face it, it's not fun. It's not
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah.
looking at your traumas or your childhood or whatever has happened in your life. And, horrible things happen to people. I get that,
Mhm.
and that's hard. But there's help out there, you
Mhm.
know. And I have worked with many healers in different modalities and you'll know when you find somebody, okay, you're gonna this resonates with me. Resonance is everything. And that's the part of what meditation, and you can begin to learn what resonates with you, which we were talking about earlier. You get to know yourself and you
Mhm.
have to trust your own intuition and be like, this doesn't feel right. I don't care if everybody's doing it. This isn't resonating with me. Then it's not going to work for you. Walk away from it.
Mhm.
That's self-empowerment. And
Yeah.
we're not trained to be powerful you know, we're not trained to trust ourselves. No, trust somebody outside of yourself. It's all here.
Yeah.
This right here, this and the heart will give you the truth every time.
Every time. It's
Yes.
beautiful because, there's so much synergy in your message and kind of what we talk about here. I think it's funny though, because, we're into all this technology, but ultimately the first thing that we always have to come to is that the mind has to be tuned in and the mind has to be put to work, that the outcome will be successful with or without technology. The technology is secondary to the mind. If the mind isn't tuned in and the mind's not programmed for success and already visually bringing that in as the reality, the technology is fighting an uphill battle. I don't even know if the technology really is going to be all that effective if the mind isn't along for the ride to say that I can do this. And you have the ability within you in so many different levels. When you talk about the power of the mind and that ability to say, I am going to do this, that is the first step, right? Because you have to have the belief that this, in fact, is possible and I will do it. Uh, it always comes to mind Dr. Joe Dispenza because he's a very good example of somebody that was told you'll never walk again. He never bought that outcome. His outcome was I absolutely will and I'm going to. And here he was in the present moment that it already happened, and then everything else adjusted to that reality. And so that to me is the ultimate that's the ultimate healing tool is the mind. And when the mind is set, then all the other instruments in the orchestra, but the mind is the conductor, right? If you
Well,
really go
yeah,
back to that analogy. And so the mind
mind
is the
is, but
conductor
also the heart. The
and the
heart has
heart.
to be brought in too, because the
Well,
mind, I think part of my imbalance, truthfully, was that I was only in the mental.
yeah,
And you can, the heart though is part of that whole creative process. And otherwise there's a big imbalance. They
huge.
actually, the heart is a feminine energy, the mind is a masculine energy, and we all have masculine and feminine energy. And if they're not balanced, man, things can get crazy.
Get
So
really
that's why
crazy.
it's so important to also include that. But yes, how we think, and then really understanding the heart and our feelings, and because as we've said, our emotions are what get blocked and create disease.
Right. And one of the technologies, now we've got some really great technology here. One of the technologies that we work with is a plasma energy system that runs off of an app. The app is on iTunes. It's $20. It's very inexpensive, but it was one of the first pieces of technology that measured heart brain coherence. And it was one of the first times where they could measure that it was the heart that was dictating what the brain was thinking. And the heart would do this, and then the brain would follow. And that technology actually was one of the first times ever that showcased that it's actually the heart center that's controlling the mind and controlling everything else. And so when you understand it's the heart center that's really the primary thing that needs to be focused on, then the mind and everything else kind of comes into tune. And so, that's another
Yeah.
thing that I find interesting. Another thing I'm just going to throw your way because you're hitting on a lot of really beautiful subjects, and it goes well beyond, just very basic information about sound. It gets into all these different esoteric parts of us as human beings. But I had somebody that told me that emotional trauma, which you had touched on earlier, is addressing that is essential for true healing. And what they told me is they said, Sean, even though you've got great technology and even though you might get results, if that person doesn't go back in and address that emotional trauma, this symptom will reoccur.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and you're hitting on it again. And so it's, to me, it's like it's not a mistake, it's not a coincidence. It's that message needs to be hammered out, that we all kind of need to do our own introspection of looking within and finding those parts of us where that trauma is stored and figuring out ways to release it. I know you've talked about um the power of sound. Can you talk a little bit? I also want to get into the bubble because I love that whole concept, and I'm also a big believer on that because I do feel that the more love and compassion that you get out, the more that comes back to you. And as you do that, it absolutely grows this energy field around you, which is a bright white light that when people come into it, obviously we can't see that, but when you come into it, you can feel that. And
Oh
putting
yeah.
that love, that compassion, those kind words, getting a door for somebody, being present in the moment and knowing that there's a lot of different ways you can interact with people with a smile, something that's very simple, but creating that. But I do want to circle back to uh, the quantum technology, the quantum information that you were talking about. And I also want to get into a little bit about the gamma vibration that you were also talking about, some of that training. Is there anything that you can kind of talk about with some basic core concepts of what that is and how some of that might be implemented? Obviously, it's a very deep subject, and I know it's probably something that you'd study for the next 10 years, perhaps, but maybe just some core concepts that people could understand about what that is, how that works, and what the benefits for us are as we sort of learn more about that.
So you're talking about using the gamma brainwave state
Well, the gamma you were
or
talking about,
emotions? I mean, you kind
what
of
there was
talked
like a
about two things.
gamma frequency set that the Tibetan monks were using, that was
Right.
something that they were working with, and then segment also into the quantum knowledge that you had gotten with the quantum healing or what there was.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, basically, when you're in the quantum field, I mean, what is the quantum field? It's the everywhere, everything. And so there's lots of people doing it. I'm actually in a training right now where we use a certain technology to access the quantum field, and it's kind of similar to the quantum sphere. And that when you access that field, you basically have access to all that is, really. Um, and you can travel through portals and stargates, and you can go to other planets and dimensions, and you can find if you understand that. I usually I work with it on my own now, but I would suggest in the beginning that you're working with somebody who can kind of guide you, in terms of where you want to go and where you don't want to
Hmm.
go.
Yeah.
And also, just like what I was talking about earlier, in terms of protection, even in the quantum field, you're in your energetic body. And I think I love to think of it like, I'm telling my age here, but what was that movie, Cocoon or something?
Mhm.
And you saw them in their energy light bodies. I love to use that in my mind. I'm like, okay, I'm in my light body. And you also want to create protection there in the quantum field, just as you would on this field, and that there's there's different people use different protection devices. Like I use a double octahedron, made a pink diamond double octahedron when I'm in the quantum field for protection. And I go to, I'm not going to name places, but there's an academy at in a different galaxy that I go to that has healing devices that I have begun to work with recently. That's a new place that I've discovered. And, you know, I mean, where's your technology coming from? Probably from off planet,
Off planet.
although we have a lot of technology that is hidden from us. And my podcast that came out today, I was interviewing somebody who kind of did a lot of disclosure about that. But, and then understanding that just because, I don't know why I feel compelled to say this, but just because, let's say an extraterrestrial um, technology is handed to you, I always am like, well, where did this come from? What was the intention behind this?
Hmm.
Because whoever created this had an intention.
Hmm.
Intention and thought is the beginning of creation.
Hmm.
And that's true for an extraterrestrial, another world being,
Hmm.
as it is for us.
Hmm.
So I am very careful about any technology that I use, and understanding how it was created, what its intention was, because you're getting scanned on a quantum field, and wherever that technology is coming from, they're accessing pretty big they're accessing the complete you,
Hmm.
and probably to the soul level. And it's like, I don't want just anybody in my energy
Right.
field. So yeah, and so that's kind of a really simple es explanation of the quantum field. But, like in the sessions that I do with people, my higher self connects with their higher self, and we may travel through past lifetimes, because we're eternal beings. So
Mhm.
this is not
Mhm.
our only lifetime. So we're also not only carrying traumas from this lifetime, we're carrying past life traumas, perhaps,
Mhm.
or birth trauma, something that happened when we were born, or we may have lost a soul piece at some point that's just floating around out there, and we want to bring that. I mean, we're just amazing. And when we
Amazing.
start, isn't
Yeah,
it just amazing?
it
I
is.
mean, I remember when I heard of past life regression for the first time many, many years ago, I thought, oh, that's just I'm having a hard enough time in this lifetime. I don't want to. That's just nonsense. And everybody's George Washington.
Yeah.
But I read a book, Time is an Illusion, by Chris Griscom, who kind of got famous when Shirley MacLaine wrote her book Out on a Limb. And she was the first person that made me understand that our emotional body is still carrying all of these memories and
Mhm.
traumas from
Mhm.
past lives.
Mhm.
And then suddenly it made sense. And so then when I found a very good practitioner, because when you're dealing with when you're in this these levels and you're working with someone, you want to make certain that you are working with a high level practitioner who is, once again, you have to trust your heart, the resonant, because I know people who have worked with somebody who ended up being a dark magician,
Hmm.
who did more harm. So be careful. Just like with technology, when you're working with a practitioner, be careful.
Hmm.
And so then all of a sudden my past life work became about clearing past life, and it had manifested physically. I had a weird thing with my knee, and I found out some interesting things from a past life, and it was still carrying the memory of that, because your emotional and body and your spirit, your mental body, they don't know that you're on to another lifetime. They're like, oh man, and they chopped my leg off. What the heck?
Yeah, that's
So,
fun.
so it's all, the more you explore it, the more you find and discover. And my biggest caution is just always spend time, and that's why it's so important to know yourself. That's why it's so important to understand so that you can tune in to your resonance, the truth, what's true for you.
Hmm.
Because we're supposed to believe everything just because why? Because some guy on Instagram said so. Come on, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So did I answer your question? I might
You
have
did.
gotten
Yeah.
off
Well, I,
track.
I love anything that's quantum because quantum, although the term is being used a lot, I don't know if everybody really has a clear understanding of what that is. And there's a couple things that I want to circle back that you brought up because you're bringing up some really great stuff. I mean, clearly we're going to have to do more calls together because we can go on for days and weeks.
Oh, I
But
don't know. I think I've told you everything I know, Sean.
okay, well, I mean, that's way more than I know, and I learned a lot, so I'm very happy at this point. But when you get into like leaving your body and going into other places, because I've spent a lot of time studying and being around Vedic culture. In Vedic culture, that's actually quite normal. They would refer to that as astral projection, and
Right.
then a lot of the technology that we have here is very good for enhancing lucid dreaming, which technically, you're separating and going off and doing whatever you want to do. And so ultimately, although the technology itself does initially work with third dimensional bodily issues, the real power and the real beauty of this technology is that it enhances all your spiritual gifts, clairvoyance and compassion and lucid dreaming and all these different things, telepathy. So you're really what you're really doing is you're really tuning into the real gifts that you've got. The third dimensional body stuff is all well and good, and I get that. And certainly it's a vehicle that we're using now to go through another lifetime. So you want it tuned up and running at its optimal performance. So there's nothing wrong with that. The technology also, as you said, that we've got and everything is off-planet technology. I mean, there's just no way around that. The technology, the most powerful technology we have, and this gets into the whole subject of med beds, which I don't know if you've heard much about that, but that's a whole another sort of genre, if you will. Med beds and miraculous healing technology. Well, the most powerful technology, really, in many ways, is plasma energy technology, and that technology is inscribed in hieroglyphics in pyramids, and so it's quite clear that that is technology that was being used thousands of years ago. And then we get into that whole subject about the pyramids and all these megalithic structures that we to this day still cannot basically produce. And so, although we try to say big stones being rolled on logs that were 80, 70, 80 tons, that whole thing is such a farce that I don't even know. Like I don't even know how that whole thing still carries weight, but it does because for us in general, we just accept, like you said, many things that we're being told, and we just don't know any better until you start really looking at the physics of it. And so, in many ways, civilizations in the past were much more advanced than we were, even with Aboriginal people, even with indigenous people, being able to tap into the power of the earth, being able to move plasma energy fields, which technically would be storms and weather, and be able to manipulate the flow of a stream and be able to sing the genetic song to get corn to just germinate. Like these people were way, 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 way more advanced than we are. And so when you talk about the phones, the minute that I heard that it was a smartphone, I immediately knew that this is something that's going to dumb us down. And because they're
Right?
brilliant. I mean, I give them credit. I mean, I watch this whole reality unfold that we're living in, and there's a part of me that's a third party person that kind of sits and watches the whole thing play out. And I find that a sense of humor is very important. So whether it's being used on me or not being used on me, I still sit back and go, "Wow, you guys are brilliant. You're really good at what you do." And you have got us all sort of in this trance that we're buying into so much of this stuff. And I think at some level in the future, because the normal flow of life and time is that things go into light, go into darkness, and that whole transition. Um, I do want to finish off and just say even Tesla, which we've got a lot of Tesla technology. Tesla, if you really study his work, gave a lot of credit to downloads that he had gotten from Pleiadians or, from other civilizations. And so that whole thing, the disclosure and all that is, that's going to find its time and place in some reality in the future, perhaps. But you can't really look at this from um, a real good level unless you really start acknowledging that there is more going on that we probably know about. And wherever you are in your level of understanding or your level of spiritual development, the main thing is, like I always circle back to, I love everybody exactly who they are for what they are in this very present moment. And we don't have to agree or disagree. And many times I think that the real truth that we all carry for ourselves and what we owe to ourselves is to be authentic. And so,
Yes.
being authentic and saying, look, I know this is coming out. I know you think I'm crazy. And in many ways, I am because the information I'm producing at this time, place, and circumstance would stamp that on my head. It's okay. I mean, it's okay. I don't expect that, my reality is going to match with yours, but I'm going to at least bring up concepts and knowledge and information that whether it resonates with you 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or many lifetimes down, you'll think, wow, I remember listening to this crazy guy on this podcast talking about this stuff, and maybe there was something to it. But the whole thing,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What you're saying is we we're actually at the end of a 26,000 year cycle, and it's been a very dark cycle, and we're heading into the light, and more people are, I call it the Great Awakening.
yeah,
More and more people are waking up to who we really are, what is really going on. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and plug my podcast here.
please do. And
Um,
your
it's
podcast will be down below where we're
Okay,
talking with your
it's
website.
conscious heart co-creation, and I'm bringing on guests. Just the guest I've been talking with, his name is Dan Willis. He's giving
I love Dan
disclosure.
Willis.
Oh yeah, and he has been working with an off-planet Pleiadian science on crystal technology.
I love
And
Dan
so,
Willis, and
yeah, his crystal technology is
yes,
just like ah,
I'm
and
yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have
no,
to
that's
because you
fine.
just brought up Dan Willis, and I just love
He's
Dan Willis.
awesome.
And Dan worked with Marcel Vogel, and Dan
Yes,
also has done a lot of videos with Elena Denon. And Elena
yes.
Denon is also like me, like a crystal fanatic. Like when you start getting into crystals,
Well,
we could have
they've
like
done. They
yeah,
just released their third class on crystal
yeah,
technology. I've done the first two. And
yeah.
so, I mean, I just intuitively was working with crystals, but they really bring in, and yeah, Dan is what a fabulous
Dan is
being he
brilliant
is.
and he's serving such a high purpose. Crystal technology, once again, the more advanced the technology gets, the simpler it gets. Now, I'm shooting this from our technology room. If I was in my office, we would be surrounded by amethyst and crystal. Like my whole room is nothing but crystals. In fact, I'm working on
I got
stage
them all over.
everywhere in this office. I mean everywhere. Uh,
Yeah.
but in here, it's the technology room. But when you start talking about that, you start talking about crystals being conscious, intelligent energy fields, and now you're going back into you can't. This all interchanges, right? Because you can't have medbed technology if you don't understand the power of crystals. And Tesla, 100 years ago, was working with them and found them to be the most, they store memory. All of our computers are run off of crystal chips. The story that I'll relay to you, and this actually came from Elena Denon, and I believe it was on one of Dan, because her and Dan have done a lot of videos together. And like I'm a junkie on anything related to that. The crystal skulls, right? Basically, what they would do is they would store all this memory in these crystal skulls, and they would bring this elder priest into a room, and the younger priest or the Brahmin or whoever would put his left hand, which is the receiving hand, on the priest, the older priest, and then the right hand on the crystal, and literally transmit the data from his mind into the crystal, and then do the exact opposite. Take the left hand, put it on the crystal, and literally transmit the knowledge from these older priests into the younger priest. And then the crystal skulls themselves are conscious entities, which
Yeah.
it's just mind blowing. I mean,
Well,
this
you're
all
into the
judgment.
quantum communication there. He shared that story too. But yeah, crystals and you know, one, like I said, I've only done the first two classes, but consciousness and love are very important principles in working with crystals. But I mean, crystal technology, these guys, they're powering their entire planet with
Yeah.
crystals,
They were
right?
actually saying that spaceships were
Yeah,
using crystals
spaceships.
because spaceships were multidimensional, and crystals were one of the only technologies that could bring them through multiple dimensions.
Right. And I haven't released his interview on crystals. He agreed to come back, and so only his first one was released today. But he was talking. I wanted him to talk about disclosure because he was very much part of Stephen Greer's disclosure project in 2001. Because this technology is being kept from us, and so it's important for us to know this isn't science fiction, even though he
Mhm.
says sometimes it's like science fiction. And he goes, that's probably what has allowed it to stay hidden because it's so science fiction sounding, but it's very real and there's facts. And you can go and you can find how we have been kept from, you know, all of our technology and the awareness of how powerful we are. I mean,
Mhm.
they don't want us to know
Mhm.
I call them they, and they don't want us to know how powerful we are. They don't want us to know that we can heal ourselves. They didn't want
Mhm.
me to know I could heal myself. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm here on this planet at this time. And I'm really excited to be here because I want to be a part of the new golden age. I came here with a mission and an intention to be part of the light and bringing this onto the thing. And I'm sure they were like, "Oh, we got to chop her down," and they did a really good job of it, not just physically, but the point being is that we are powerful and we're fractals of source, and we can heal ourselves and we can create an amazing world. And I'm so delighted to have met you. I really didn't know who you were, Sean. I'm like, now who is this guy and what does he want to talk to me about? I don't use med beds, and I don't use you know, I mean, that crystal I showed up, that's my biggest technology in the bowls,
Mhm.
but that crystal, I, I
That's
remember when I was
that's
in a
enough.
lot of pain, I would put it
Yeah.
on my chest and the
Hmm.
pain would just dissipate. And
Hmm.
Dan shared the story of watching Marcel Vogel,
Yeah.
um, in real time, just remove a giant tumor on a kid's leg in real time,
Yeah.
and so that's what our future is. And it's and I know it feels very dark right now because um, people are waking up, but it also means that we have to collectively stand up and say, you guys are out. You're corrupt. You're out. You're dissonant. If we're going to talk
Yeah.
about sound, you're not resonating with the truth anymore. And this is our planet, and we want it. I mean, the ETs, the bad ones, if you will, have all been removed. And so it's just their little minions, and it's our job to wake up to this and claim who we are and claim our planet and remove them. And that's the work ahead of all of us. And
Hmm.
you are a part of that, obviously. I'm doing my little part, and everybody just does their little part. And we're
Hmm.
going to move into an unbelievable world on this planet.
It's a very exciting time right now because I'm definitely seeing sort of what I would call an acceleration phase where I do really feel that people are waking up. I do feel like a lot of these concepts and things that we're talking about, which is our reality, that 20, 15, 20, even 5, 10 years ago, people would be like, wow, I don't know about that. And now they're really starting to wake up and they're starting to sort of what I would say tune in. And, but the one thing that I always tell everybody is that change begins with you inside, right? Change begins with you changing internally and developing that love bubble. The love bubble for me is the ultimate part of change because when there's an excess of compassion and love, and you build that field in your body and you carry that and people feel it, that is change. That's change one person at a time. It's done with love and compassion. And through that, all other change then can be facilitated. But, you know,
Amen. Amen, brother.
thank
That's
you.
so true. I mean, whew,
And
powerful.
yeah, and it's easy to look at the outside world and it's easy to say, wow, this and that. But if you look within and you say, wow, how can I be a part of this change? It's all about being more understanding, more compassionate, more loving, more less judging, right? Like I've seen so much transition in my lifetime. I'm 59. And I remember when people would sit down and have conversations and it wouldn't be so polarizing. You know what I mean?
Oh no, yeah.
And
That division that they've created is very intentional.
well,
They
it
want us
is.
to be
And
divided.
well, the part of it that I love is like, God, you guys are so good. Because I remember when things weren't so crazy and you've created crazy
Yeah,
to be
no.
normal. And now we
Yeah.
need normal to be back to normal. But the thing, I guess the point I'm trying to make is everybody has a daughter, everybody has a mother, everybody has a brother, everybody has a sister. And if we look at people and love them for who they are and what they are, everybody's in a different stage of evolution. Everybody's in a different stage of spiritual understanding. Everybody's in it, but it doesn't matter what they think or if they believe or don't believe. I still love everybody, right? And certainly there's probably a few exceptions to the rule, which we won't get into. But from a general standpoint, from the general everyday person, I love all of the people that I interact with. I love who they are. We don't always agree. We don't have to. Sometimes it's good for me to hear another viewpoint. But there's always compassion, there's always love, and there's always that final moment where it's like, I love you for exactly who you are in this very present moment. And I
Yeah.
feel like as an individual soul, amongst all my other brothers and sisters here, when that part starts dialing in and we start treating each other with love and compassion, and I can't change the world, but I can change myself inside. I can change the relationships that I have. I can change the way I respond to things. I can gain that sort of knowledge and understanding of what's happening around me, who's doing what, where, when, why, and I get all that. It's like I'm taking off these bounded ropes, if you will, or these attachments, and I'm breaking out of this sort of matrix, but I'm doing it in a loving, compassionate way, and I'm watching other people, disengage from that matrix as well. And I have to finish. I know we've been on the call a while, and I don't like to put time limits on it, but I know that initially we probably said, hey, let's just do a preview. But I want to talk about the process of you, how you set up that love bubble. I want to talk about that process of how you put that light energy out there and no negative energy can come in. If you could just maybe touch on that briefly,
Sure.
and then we could call.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, I was in a very dark environment at one point in my life, and it was, I still kept in my heart the compassion. And so what I realized in that moment, and I will say, I mean, I'm 67, so I my mother was really the teacher of this because when we would go out, she would talk to everybody. And I would be a little embarrassed as a kid, but then one day I realized every time she left, those people were left smiling.
Yeah.
And so she said, I'm a sunbeam. That's my job. And what you just were saying, I have to just say that I, I was almost in tears because that's who I am. When I go out, I see everyone, whether it's the checkout clerk, the
Yeah.
server, the whoever, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I carry that light and they respond.
Mhm.
They'll be like, I had this checkout girl one time and she was just like, and I said, you don't smile. She goes, no. And I said, well, you're in an interesting business if you don't like people. She goes, yeah. And I told her this joke and she started laughing and I was like, ding, I got you. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I kind of inherited the love bubble from my mother. But what I also realized is that we've already talked about how powerful thoughts are,
Hmm.
and that, just like you can create love thoughts, you can create hate thoughts. And the truth is, if somebody's being cruel or hateful to me, now I'm not talking about severe abuse, that's a whole different level.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about, it's like with the love bubble, the idea is that whatever somebody is sending to me, okay, I don't have to accept it. And what happens is, and I don't have to, there's this idea of revenge, and it's like, oh, I'm going to get you. You don't have to when you're in the love bubble, because if somebody's sending that to you and you're in the love bubble, it bounces right back to them. And I cannot tell you how many times it'd be like, oh, that's okay, you're going to take care. We create our reality, so I'm not taking on your reality, because your reality is going to take care of you, and one day you're going to rise up out of that, hopefully. But until then, I'm not going to let it lower my frequency. And it's very difficult to do with when you're in touch with people who are not in a love bubble. But
Hmm.
like you said, the other thing is that compassion is part of recognizing you have no idea what's going on with this person.
Correct.
And so
100%.
you don't necessarily have to interact with them. Like I see people out in public, and I'm walking around my love bubble and I look and I get this like, don't even think about it. And I'm like, no problem. Because I don't know what's going on with that
Yeah.
person and they're not in the mood to smile and be happy. And that's cool.
And
And
that's okay. Yeah.
yeah, and that's part of the whole compassion thing.
100%.
It's like I don't force my jokes and joy onto everybody,
Yeah.
And
They're still
and
entering the field though. They're still entering the field if they come through you, but
yes,
but
yes.
but whether or not, because you were
The
talking about.
exchange is happening,
Yes,
whether it's on the conscious. That's, there's an energy exchange always. And
always.
so your energy is definitely creating a different frequency for that person to consider.
Hmm.
And it's not your job to force it on them, but you've created that for them to experience.
Hmm.
And more often than not, people respond pretty quickly to that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the love bubble was created just out of just being, I'm very much a people person, and I'm very uh sensitive to people. I'm very observant of people. I'm always watching people. I'm amazed at how many people don't pay attention to other people. I'm
It,
like, how can you go through? I mean, they don't see any of it. And it's
no.
like, I'm always watching people,
Yeah.
that's just who I am. And so yeah, oh, when
It's
you were
interesting.
talking about
Yeah.
it,
It's
go
interesting
ahead.
because we there's so many things synergistically that we kind of see from a very similar perspective. A lot of times I'm out hiking and I'll walk on the trail and people walk by. I always am friendly. I always say hello. I don't always get a hello back, but it's okay. It's like I did my part. I said hello. And I understand you might be in a moment where you're not having a great day or whatever it might be, and it's okay. I still love you. I wish you the best. And, maybe the next time I see you on the trail, we'll say hello. And then the other thing I think is hilarious is that you've got people that are hiking in nature and they're like this on their phone. And I'm
Or they
thinking,
got earbuds in listening to
yeah,
music, and
no,
it's
they
like
do.
a
They
whole
do.
pack of deer just ran by, but you didn't hear it or see
And
it.
the beauty of all the sounds of nature, the beauty of just being in that field of all infinite miracles and possibilities in that unified field of nature. And you're in it, but you haven't entered into it. It's like, oh my God, it's such a big door. Just walk through it and throw that phone in the car. And you'd just be amazed at how amazing life can be, when you start looking at the miracles that are all around us. I'm going to finish on one note, and then I'll pass it off to you for a final word. But I do find that the most powerful thing for me is to go into a state of gratitude, and a state of gratitude being in the very present moment. And so I'm going to just say that I'm super grateful to be on this call with you today. And I don't know why I'm even getting emotional, but
I
I
you've
find
got
that
you
I
I'm
find
close
that
to
when you get
tears
into
too.
that mode of gratitude, everything changes. As bad as things can be, if you can get into that mode of gratitude, it's like that is your power because there's so many good things going on around us despite all the crazy. And I feel like the other thing is people are never in the present moment. They're thinking about what's coming up next week, next month, tonight, but they're not in that moment. So the one thing I always like to do on these calls is zero in on the present moment and zero in on being grateful. And with that
Right.
being said, before I break down for whatever known reason, I got to throw that back to you. And I'm so grateful, first off, to say that you were here today with me to spend this time together. It's been amazing. I know we started off and said we're just going to do a quick little promo and talk, but as soon as I started talking, I'm like, I got to get the camera on. We've got to record this moment because in life, it's hard to say when you're going to be able to connect again. And for anybody that's out there that wants to know more, Stefanie's information is right below me on the screen, and it's going to be in our description section. But go ahead for people that are listening to like Spotify or a podcast, if you could throw that back out there. And then I always like to throw it to the guest and say, give us, some final words of wisdom or anything that you'd like to share before we call it an episode.
Well, um when you were speaking earlier, I was holding back tears too. So, you know, you're talking about being in the now. I mean, everything is in the now. And when you are in the now, you're certainly more in tune with, like, here you are. And here's this beautiful connection we've made. I had no idea who you were, and I was like, "Oh man." But then I just came into the present moment and I was like, "Oh, okay." And now I'm like, we both just our hearts have connected. My heart is wide open, and I'm so grateful to have found you and met you. And I look forward to keeping in touch. And to everyone else, it's all here, and we're all one. Don't forget that we are all one, and the power of one is can really change lives.
It
So,
really can. We live in a world of infinite miracles and infinite possibilities, and they're always present in any second. Everything and anything is always infinitely possible. And Stefanie, this has just been an absolutely amazing call. I can't wait to go check out some more of your podcasts, this stuff with
oh,
Dan.
okay. Yeah.
And once again, can you give everybody the name of the podcast?
Oh, it's called Conscious Heart Co-Creation, and it's on
Conscious Heart
Spotify
Co-Creation.
and Apple. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Because we're conscious, we're co-creators, and we use our heart, right? So conscious heart co-creation.
I love that. And
Yeah.
when you co-create with somebody like yourself and you share the vision and you share that whole thing, then, exponentially it becomes more powerful and exponentially it manifests even faster through the co-creation process, which is beautiful. I mean, yeah, the world's a better place with you in it, and I'm super happy I got a chance to hang out
Oh,
with you today. So thank you for your time
yeah.
and
Well,
stay with
thank
me here
you.
for
And thank you for what you're giving us.
yeah, well, my whole thing is to find people like you and get them out where people can find them and help,
Oh,
is kind of helping you, with your dream and what you're doing. So it's a win-win for both of us. And it's a win-win for all the guests and all the people that are able to dial in and get information and listen to these podcasts. So thank you for all the people out there that are listening as well. And we appreciate you too. And Stefanie, stay with me for just a sec. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video
sure.
but we'll catch everybody here on the next one.